with this international treaty. On this day, the movement to abolish all nuclear weapons gains traction. After decades of anti-nuke organizing, those profiting off these life-threatening weapons will have to reckon with new laws. Companies making nukes will face increasing calls to divest. Elected officials will be pressured to take a stronger stance, and the United States will be forced to act. The United States has refused to sign the treaty. Instead, U.S. officials continue to engage in a nuclear arms race, threatening nuclear war. In fact, not only has the U.S. refused to sign, but the Trump administration went so far as to send letters to international leaders who had ratified, insisting they were making a mistake and asking them to de-ratify the treaty. So far, the U.S. is refusing to follow what is now an international norm. The U.S. is failing to reconcile with its own devastating history once again.
75,000 people were killed immediately when the U.S. bombed Hiroshima. 40,000 were killed days later when the U.S. bombed Nagasaki. And even more people have died from radiation poisoning, more than doubling each of these death tolls. This does not count countless others who have died and will die from exposure to radioactivity. Additionally, the U.S. biggest nuclear testing site is on Western Shoshone Nation, native territory where widespread cancer related to the explosions ravages the community. For the lives lost to nuclear weapons, we will now offer a moment of silence. These weapons were always immoral. Now they're illegal. We are calling on L3Harris to stop making these deadly weapons or have any connection with them. To save humanity, we urge L3Harris and companies that have ties to nuclear weapons whatsoever to convert their resources from weapons of mass extinction to green technologies and other critical human needs. Thank you so much for all of the organizers and everybody right here today, particularly nuclearban.us, who have been pushing for this treaty for years. I will now turn it to our handful of speakers who represent a variety of local stakeholders, community organizations, and faiths banding together in support of the treaty's significance. Please welcome our first speaker, Lindsay Sabadosa. Yay!
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to share the news that, and I'm going to have to read the full name, that this morning, HD 455, a resolve providing for an investigation and study by a special commission relative to the existential threat posed by nuclear weapons to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has been filed with the Massachusetts legislature. Now, I should say I'm very proud to file this resolve, but this resolve is the result of the work of all of you standing here today, who have continued year after year to bring to the legislature's attention that this issue is an issue that the state of Massachusetts can and must weigh in on. Now, this is a hard road ahead of us. Getting anything to pass in the legislature is a hard road, and you all know that. But I believe that this is the session that we can do something. We had a victory last session with a home rule petition for Northampton that prohibited the city from working with people who contract to produce, manufacture, maintain nuclear weapons. It was a disqualification of bidders, and it was something that has not happened in this state before. So that means that the legislature is listening and is willing to work. And I am committed to spending the next 2 years working with all of you to make sure that this resolve becomes the law, that we set forth a commission, and that voices are brought to the table so that we can talk about having a nuclear-free future. I am so proud to represent you. I'm so proud of all of the work that you are doing. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, because it means so much to me and to the future of this country. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Marty Nathan, and I'm with Climate Action Now. Thank you, Miranda and the Resistance Center, Vicky and Timon and the Nuclear Ban Movement, and all of the coalition that brought us here today. Today is a celebratory day for many a reason. The resistance, first of all, successfully defeated Trump after bending the Democrats' policy towards, I can't see because I don't have my glasses, oh my God, towards justice and environmental sustainability. And today, the treaty, amazing, on the prohibition of nuclear weapons goes into effect in nations around the world. One day here. Though the United States did not sign it and the Obama and Trump administrations were dedicated to upgrading the nuclear arsenal, we have further good news in that the new Biden administration will extend the START treaty with Russia for 5 years. For the last 8 years, Climate Action Now has focused its attention on the fight for the just elimination of greenhouse gas emissions. But our work every day dovetails with that of the anti-war and nuclear disarmament movement because, number one, war-making and militarism are the source of massive carbon emissions. If the U.S. military were a country, it would rank above Portugal for its carbon footprint. Secondly, the purpose of the war machine is to destroy. It destroys the natural carbon sinks, forests, and sustainable agriculture, as well as homes, towns, and cities whose rebuilding absorbs massive amounts of greenhouse gases. Third, greed for fossil fuels and ensuring their steady supply are major threats to world peace. Think Iraq, Iran, the arming of Israel and Saudi Arabia. Fourth, climate change and the social instability bred by climate disasters are threat multipliers in conflict over food, water, and land, leading to war. Fifth, climate refugees, such as those from Central America, pose an excuse for militarization of our borders and others. Perhaps the most insidious tie, though, is the opportunity cost of militarism. The U.S. has spent $6.4 trillion on war over the last 2 decades. It would cost only $4.5 trillion to transform our entire electrical grid to purely renewable sources. Ending the subsidies of oil and gas and cutting the military budget in half would together provide $1 trillion a year to switch to a green economy. Specifically, the ongoing maintenance, upgrading, and now testing of nuclear weapons costs more than $70 billion per year. Timon, who just walked by, has written a paper outlining how the elimination of nuclear weapons alone could fund what we need, a Green New Deal. The green transformation that we as a nation must undergo can and should start at home. That is why we of CAN and 2 Degrees fully support the request that L3Harris, as a part of our Northampton community, lead the way and repurpose their manufacturing capabilities from military and nuclear use to creating a nation and a world that will serve our neighbors, our children, and our grandchildren. Swords to plowshares. Thank you, everyone, for your presence here today. I am Pat Hines from the Trap Rock Center for Peace and Justice. A limited nuclear war could trigger a global famine that would likely end billions of lives. A full-scale nuclear war would end human and other life on Earth, reminding us of the classical description of total war. They had to destroy the village to save it. A nuclear war, whether by accident, misjudgment, or intention, to destroy the enemy would destroy the rest of us, and how insane is that? So what then must President Biden do? First, open dialogue with and renew agreements with Russia immediately. Second, change U.S. policy in 3 ways. No first use of nuclear weapons. Take weapons off hair trigger alert. Select, for now, another senior official to share decision-making about pressing the button. 3, revive the agreement with Iran. They do not develop nuclear weapons, and we lift sanctions. With South Korea, engage in diplomacy. This is 4th. Engage in diplomacy with North Korea to freeze and roll back their nuclear weapons program. Of course, we follow their example. 5, stop the new program we have of upgrading nuclear weapons. It is an estimated cost of $2 trillion. And 6th, listen to the world's majority of people and lead the United States towards signing the UN treaty. The others will follow. It is our only solution to exit a dead-end system that permits a single human being to destroy in minutes all that humanity has constructed over millennia. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Autumn. I'm here with the anti-L3Harris campaign of the Resistance Center, as well as Decarcerate Western Massachusetts. And I would especially like to thank Miranda and everyone from the Resistance Center who made this possible, as well as massive thank you to my comrades from Decarcerate Western Mass who are here today. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are on stolen land that needs to be returned. More specifically, we are on the stolen land of the Nipmuc and Pocumtuck nations and the Wabanaki Confederacy. This land needs to be returned, and we want to honor the stewardship of these nations over this land. Our presence here is to call for an end to imperialism and the U.S. military that must also include uplifting and supporting indigenous self-determination within Turtle Island, the so-called U.S., and returning stolen land, abolishing all settler colonial states like the U.S. Cutting down a poisonous tree requires destroying its roots. Nuclear weapons do not exist in a vacuum. As we are standing here to advocate for an end to nuclear weapons, we need to ground this advocacy in abolishing the systems that create nuclear weapons, such as capitalism, the prison state, imperialism, and colonialism, and the military. We must be uncompromisingly anti-capitalist, anti-colonial, and abolitionists, Organizing against nuclear weapons requires a firm grounding in environmental justice. As my previous speakers have said, the U.S. military is one of the biggest polluters on the planet. Until we abolish prisons, the military, capitalism, and colonialism, the environment, and climate change will never be able to heal. As the anti-L3Harris team, we are a team of organizers who have been creating an anti-imperialist, abolitionist campaign against L3Harris, here one of the top 10 largest military contractors in the world. They obviously have an office here in Northampton. We're not in a bubble from the military-industrial complex here in Northampton, as sometimes we like to think. L3Harris embodies the phrase, all cages are connected. The capitalist, ideological, and material connections between police, immigrant and customs enforcement, customs and border patrol, the military, the Israeli Defense Forces, and the occupation of Palestine. To name just a few of L3Harris's role in supporting war and occupation, they are funding the caging, surveillance, and torture of our migrant comrades at the U.S.-Mexico border and in ICE detention centers across the country through their contracts with ICE, manufacturing surveillance equipment for the U.S.-Mexico border patrol and police departments that surveil Black and brown communities. L3Harris has received $360 million in contracts from manufacturing Predator and Reaper drones used by the U.S. military in the invasions of Iraq, Yemen, and Afghanistan. They have built bombs and battle tanks used by the Israeli Defense Forces in the occupation of Palestine, as well as surveillance technology that gets used in dehumanizing checkpoints throughout the occupation of Palestine. Similarly, we would like to acknowledge that it is no coincidence that L3Harris is located on the same site as the old Northampton State Hospital, a state institution founded on the ideology of eugenics that incarcerated and tortured disabled and mad people well into the 20th century. As abolitionists, we recognize that the carceral state extends beyond prisons and jails. It also includes institutions that warehouse disabled people. We understand the innate connections between eugenics, the carceral state, and colonialism, and we are here to say that there is no disability justice without abolition and vice versa. Military contractors like L3Harris should not exist anywhere, and it says a lot about toxic Northampton liberalism that L3Harris is lurking right next to the community garden. Our campaign is not only to draw attention to the atrocities of L3Harris, but to call for an end to all cages, borders, and colonial occupations. All people should be able to move freely without borders, checkpoints, prisons, jails, colonial occupations, or capitalist economies depriving people of basic resources. No borders, no war, no cages, free Palestine.